We have about American history, and under American history, we have about creating a new nation. Introduction. There had to be two wars to establish the independence and the viability of the United States, starting with that for independence and ending with a second war against the British between 1812 and 1815. It wasn't until after that that the Parliament completely accepted the American independence. While all of this was going on, the founding fathers found to provide leadership. From 1789 and until 1825, they were presidents. Besides that, they also held state and local offices. When the founding fathers died, the US was well established. The following generation would focus not on wars with Europe, but on westward expansion and on developing an industrial system for the nation.
The Revolution. In 1776, the American colonies wanted to declare themselves independent from the British. But the British, on the other hand, had to fight for attaining it, meaning that they had to spend years fighting for things they already had. Slowly, the American conquered different parts of British colonies, the Brits, and then it forced the Brits to retreat. The Brits had a different way of warfare. They conquered the seaports and the most influential cities, but they did not know that 90% of the Americans lived in the countryside or small towns. They discovered that the Brits were well into unfamiliar terrain, and they took that as an advantage. And then one of the most important battles of this war was the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. It was when the Americans captured most of the General Burgoyne's army and forced him to surrender. General Burgoyne was an army officer and political. This victory convinced the French that America was capable of winning, and it led to an alliance.
The states. During the American Revolution, the 13 colonies came closer together, mostly the army, but also through civilian resistance. Nevertheless, they were very different in geography, social organization, and ethnicity. A Protestant farmer in New Hampshire was not much like a Catholic slaveholder in Maryland or a German speaking wheat farmer in eastern Pennsylvania. They were also quite different in size and population. Virginia was the state with the most people, while New York was the largest and could support large populations. During the Revolution, they had been held together by their common enemy, but after a few years of independence, there were signs that the Confederation weren't strong enough to last. This was very worrying.
And then the Constitution. Well, under the British government, there was no constitution. They had customs and various laws, but never defined document, and still it did manage to govern. But even today, the British do not have a constitution. Denmark first got their constitution in the mid 19th century, and when the founding fathers met in Philadelphia, there were no precedents for them to follow. But still, they managed to make a document which was no more than 5,000 words long at the time. This document was the Constitution. And this constitution is also known as the shortest constitution in the whole world. This might be because the founding fathers didn't go that much into detail. Yeah. And then when the constitution was released, the states has to justify it, and then they had to decide if they wanted to join the constitution. Some states immediately joined, while others needed some convincing. And yeah, we will then move on to founding fathers.
The founding fathers: John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, James Madison, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Alexander Hamilton were identified as the seven key founding fathers. They all had great impact and important positions in the early government. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin worked on the committee to draft the Declaration of Independence, while Alexander Hamilton James Madison, and John Jay were authors of the Federalist Papers. Washington commanded the Revolutionary Army. At the time, everybody knew that George Washington was going to be the first president of the United States. He had won the War of Independence as general, and he was seen as a person with many personal integrity. Besides that, he was also healthy, which meant that he would be able to serve for 2 terms. He had the respect of both Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. They were the leaders of the two major political factions. The two of them had complete opposite opinions on most subjects, so this was quite a big thing for Washington.
And then the War of 1812. Well, one of the founding fathers from Virginia in 1809 served the next 2 terms as president. When he took the office, he thought it was impossible for America to stay neutral in the war that was raging among them. He then entered the war in 1812 on the French side because they already were allies in the beginning. This made the Brits very angry, and then they sent additional troops to America in 1814, and they broke into Washington, D.C., and burned the White House. They proceeded on attacking Baltimore. Even though they bombed them heavily, they were unable to capture the city. The British also attacked from Canada's front, but it was a failure, and they had to withdraw back to Canada. In 1815, the British people had to admit the United States' strength and stability since becoming independent. Their population had doubled to more than 8 million, and their territory had doubled in size. After 1815, the British never invaded the country again. And the constitution had showed the people that the government was stable, the economy was growing, and they could defend themselves if they were attacked.